just mentioned last week, what are some possible reasons why a person would not ask God? Well, let's step back. Would you be careful of asking God for a sign?
Yes.
Why would you be careful asking God for a sign? Huh? Okay, so there's an obligation. He might think, yeah, okay. Right, there's the idea of do not, what does the Bible say? Do not test. Right? Could the sign be considered a test? Right? But we have examples of people asking God for signs, don't we? Sometimes it works out for them. Other times it doesn't. And ultimately it relates back to, why are you asking? Right? Why are you asking? What is your intention? What is your purpose? Do you think God is so analytical and so, it's almost like a judge judging based upon the letter of the law? You said this. Does he not also consider why and what's going on in here, right, for the testing of the Lord? Okay, so, all right, we got to take that into consideration. But I think, going back to Fred's point, why Ahaz does not want a sign is because first he's being told, do not fear, which ultimately we're going to see, do not fear leads to do not go and look for allies other places. See, fear leads them to go and get Egypt's help, or maybe Syria's help, or maybe Babylon's help, right? So they start spreading their wings a little bit, thinking that the surrounding nations can do more for them than what God can do. Now, we have to be a little patient and a little understanding with people's ability or having a hard time trusting God. What I mean by that is a lot of times we're reading Scripture sequentially, acting as if these events are happening right then and there. And what have I said about signs and miracles about the majority of the Old Testament and the majority of the history of the Old Testament? Most people in the Old Testament, guess what? They never saw. They never saw one of the miracles, right? There may be hundreds of years in between books. Now, we have no history or no recording of signs, so we just kind of go off. But a lot of them, they're not in battles constantly. They're not fighting wars constantly. God hasn't, told them to go march around walls. They have the same stories that we have, don't they? They have the same stories that their grandfather, great-grandfather, have been passed down and have been told, this is your history. Don't we have that same history? And do we, at times, lack trust, lack faith? Yeah, I know God did it for Abraham. I know God did it for Moses, but those were special cases. He's not going to do the same for me.
Do you think it would have been a sign that there was no doubt that he knew where it came from?
What do you mean?
Well, what I mean by that is there were signs that's well, this is irrefutably from the Lord. And then there are people today that pray for wisdom and guidance and a sign, or maybe something they should do or not do. That's one of the things I've always struggled with. When you're waiting to make a decision, okay, well, how do you know it's from the Lord? Or is this oh, this is really what you want? I mean, obviously the Lord worked differently then than he does now.
Yeah. So I think the big difference, right, we'll get into the practicality here in a second. The big difference is God saying, hey, ask of me, and I'll show you. It's kind of like, what did Midian ask for? Midian in Judges. The fleece to either be dry or wet, right? Am I getting his name right? All right, let me fact check myself. We're about to read the Midianites here. It's not Gideon. Gideon, right? Who's teaching this class? Gideon, he asked for the sign. Everyone looked at me weird. I was like, okay, maybe I'm getting his name wrong. Gideon, right? So Gideon asked for the sign, the fleece to be wet. And he asked for it, and we just studied this a couple weeks ago. He asked for it 2 or 3 times, didn't he? In a row. And yet, he was pursuing something that God was okay with answering that sign. So he's asking, and I think going back to Fred's comment, if he gets a sign, that means he's got to put faith in the sign. If he gets it, if he asks for it and he gets it, that obligates him to trust. Is God always super clear with his signs? And do things always happen immediately? They don't. Case in point, the sign that God is going to give him is the birth of a child. And when that child is how many years old? About 12. 12 years is a long time to wait for an answer, isn't it? I mean, that's a long time. All right, if I'm asking God to help me with something, to show, it's like, well, in 12 years you'll figure out, that I was there. That's hard for us. And so oftentimes, kind of getting back to the practical, we're always looking for this, sign when God's really going, trust me. Really, the sign was not about when God was going to do something, but are you going to trust me through the process? Are you going to trust me? It's going to be hard for 12 years. Well, a lot of us want answers now. I want Assyria to stop badgering us now. I want to feel safety now. And God's saying, you can feel safe. Even with Assyria at your front door, you can feel safe because I told you you'll be safe. And he's going to promise here in a minute, even if they don't back off, they are not going to conquer you. They are not going to take you over. They're not going to breach your walls. They're going to pass on by. But for 12 years, you're going to have the same pressure you have now of them. They won't defeat you, but you've got to trust me for 12 years. And then in 12 years, you'll get the sign that Assyria will no longer be a problem.
Isaiah was asking Ahab to trust God.
Yep.
God said, trust me with Isaiah. And trust me, somebody you can't see. Takes a lot further.
Well, okay, yes. Isaiah is the prophet who's saying it, but the Lord sent Isaiah, right? And so the only way these people hear the word of the Lord normally is through the prophets, right? It's kind of like Nathan going to David. David could have easily said, hey, Nathan, you're just a man like me, right? But I don't think Ahaz has an issue trusting Isaiah. As we're going to see here later, I think he has an issue trusting God. It's kind of like when God had to reassure Samuel, hey, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me, right? Do you think it would have changed if Ahaz would have had like a voice from the clouds? Oftentimes when God speaks from a cloud, do people listen, or what do they usually do? They usually get terrified and run away, right? So sometimes it's, this was actually, I was listening to a podcast earlier this week, and the guy was basically questioning, it was in a round panel of atheists and different religious people, and he basically asked the question, why does God speak to some people and not others, right? You hear all these stories of, people maybe hearing the voice of God, it got them to change got to change their life, or in Scripture, God spoke to some people and not for other people, and ultimately, the guy's like, hey, let me show you some people who God spoke to, and they still rejected him. Right? So God knows, first of all, some of us are in here and never heard the voice of God, right? And all of us have decided to believe, right? Do you need that? There are people who could have a divine revelation and probably go, wow, that was trippy, right? I mean, they would have accustomed it to something else. Right, so there's a lot of things. I don't think Ahaz doubted there was a God, because especially in ancient Near Eastern cultures, finding an atheist in ancient Near Eastern cultures was almost non-existent. You didn't have people who didn't believe in supernatural, right? But what they did understand, and one of the problems that they struggled with, was they did not just believe in one God, they believed in multiple gods. And they believed the gods of Assyria, and the gods of Cana, and the gods of Babylon. That's why we were studying in our Sunday night class, they put their what? They constantly did what? They constantly put their trust in those gods. Well, why? Well, they've got a big army. They're a big nation. And if you're an ancient Near Eastern person, you only flourish because a god helped you flourish. They attributed everything, good and bad, to the work of the gods. So if Assyria is teaming up with Israel and they even have any, pressure put against Judah, well, their God must be pretty powerful, must be pretty big. And God is big. And these are always shows, by the way, even going back to Egypt in the 10 plagues. Every plague was God proving power over one of Egypt's gods. Every plague was putting power over one of Egypt's gods. Every single thing that he did, one of their gods was the master of. Master of the Nile, right? Master of, the locust, master of all, and God just goes, let me show you who's master, right? And it's, the show off is kind of between the prophets, Moses and the prophet of Egypt, and after 2 plagues, they're like, we've got nothing. This can only be the hand of God, right? So, similar thing, I think Ahaz is just struggling, 1, to trust God, and 2, if he gets a sign, and if he doesn't trust it, then he's going to be held even more responsible and more accountable for not following through, okay? But Isaiah 7 and Isaiah 8, this is what we've been talking about, they're almost mirrors of each other, okay? Isaiah 7 is assigned to Ahaz. Isaiah 8 is assigned to Isaiah and his disciples. There's about 10 years in between chapter 7 and chapter 8. Okay, and we'll see this. So the sign to Ahaz is, hey, there's a young woman. She's going to give birth to a child. You're going to name him Emmanuel. Before the child knows right from wrong, right, which is about can choose right from wrong, not just knows, but can choose the right thing over the wrong thing is the Hebrew, which is about 12 in Jewish culture. Okay, 12 is when you become a person who can determine right from wrong. That's when Assyria will be defeated. And once again, we're dealing with the king of Assyria. Same king we're going to see in chapter 8. But this is a sign to Isaiah and his disciples. Tells Isaiah, hey, go to the prophetess, most likely Isaiah's wife. Okay? She gives birth. Call him Maher Shahala Hashbaz. All right? That's Larry almost named child that, right? Yeah. Before the child is able to say mommy and daddy, which is about 2 to 3 years old, okay, you're looking at, the king of Assyria defeated. So this is about 12 years looking forward. These are looking at the same events, 10 years apart. So what we're going to see in between these is the lack of trust that Ahaz has in this sign is going to lead to Judah rejecting God and lacking trust in Ahaz's signs, and Isaiah and his disciples, and we're going to see that, needing to be reminded, stand strong. Isaiah is actually going to be a sign himself. He is going to live out what God asked Ahaz to live out. Faith and trust. Show them what it looks like. That's what we're going to see. Okay? So Isaiah 7, Isaiah 8, very much parallel, speaking of the same thing. But this, Isaiah speaking to Ahaz, this is God speaking to Isaiah. Okay? I said last week we'd read the rest of Isaiah 7, so let's go ahead and do that. All right. So we're going to start in verse 10 of Isaiah 7, and we're going to read down to 25. So let's have someone read 10 to 17, and then someone else who will read 18 to 25. Who wants to read it? Who wants to read first? Ian? Here, let me get you a mic.
So Isaiah 7, 10 through 17.
Yep, 10 through 17.
All right, Isaiah 7. Isaiah 7, 10 through 17. Again the Lord spoke to Ahaz, ask a sign of the Lord your God, let it be deep as Sheol or high as heaven. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, and I will not put the Lord to the test. And he said, hear then, O house of David, is it too little for you for you to weary men, that you weary my... Sorry. Is it too little for you to weary men, that you weary my God also? Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. He shall eat curds and honey when he knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good. For before the boy knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land whose two kings you dread will be deserted. The Lord will bring upon you and upon your people and upon your father's house such days as have not come since the days that Ephraim departed from Judah, the king of Assyria.
All right, who wants to read 18 through 25? Got a lot of readers in here. Steve, we'll get Steve. Thank you, sir.
18 through 25. In that day the Lord will whistle for the fly that is in the remotest part of the rivers of Egypt, and for the bee that is in the land of Assyria. They will all come and settle on the steep ravines, on the ledges of the cliffs, on all the thorn bushes, and on all the watering places. In that day the Lord will shave with a razor, hired from regions beyond the Euphrates, that is, with the king of Assyria, the head and the hair of the legs, and it will also remove the beard. Now in that day a man may keep alive a heifer and a pair of sheep, and because of the abundance of the milk produced, he will eat curds, for everyone that is left within the land will eat curds and honey. And it will come about in that day that every place where there used to be 1,000 vines, valued at 1,000 shekels of silver, will become briars and thorns. People will come there with bows and arrows, because all the land will be briars and thorns. As for all the hills which used to be cultivated with the hoe, you will not go there for fear of briars and thorns, but they will become a place of pasturing oxen and for sheep to trample.
Okay, so this is interesting. Assyria at this time is the superpower of the world. And what God is saying is, first, I'm going to give you a sign that Assyria will come. But when the sign comes, when it's to its completion, what will happen to the land of Assyria? Be nothing. You'll go there and it will be deserted. It'll be thorns and right? You won't even be able to till the land. Assyria will be no more. Now, if you're currently looking at the current Assyria in Ahaz's time, and you're looking 10 years in the future, no one at this time is even coming close to pressuring Assyria. Babylon's slowly making their way, but they're so far, right? They're so far east that they're not a threat yet. Assyria is what Egypt would have been, right? And God's basically saying, don't worry, in 10 years, they're not even going to be a nation anymore. Do you see why Ahaz may have struggled with trusting God? Because logically, in the way the world works, 10 years is not enough time to completely collapse in our world the superpower at that time, right? Even the collapse of Rome, how many years did it take for Rome to finally fall? It began to fall in the first century, about 80, right? But it finally didn't fall till like 300. Like it took about 300 years for it to, even Israel itself took almost 300 to 400 years to fall from its high period. God's saying in 10, I'm going to do it in 10. Ahaz is told to go off faith. But once again, this faith is based upon what? Has God done something like this before? Has God completely wiped other nations out overnight? Has God taken care of armies? And, what happened to Egypt's army of 10,000 strong chariots? Which during that time, you ain't fighting 10,000 chariots. What happened overnight to 10,000 chariots? Got washed in a river, right? So, he's told to trust. All right, so let's look at chapter 8. And now someone else read the first 10 verses. And we're going to spend some more time in chapter 8 because chapter 7 and chapter 8 are similar. We're going to spend a little more time in chapter 8 and figure out what's going on. Who wants to read the first 10 verses of...
Chapter 8. Moreover, the Lord said unto me, Take thee a great roll and write in it with a man's pen concerning that word that Maher-shalal-Bazar.
Hey, if I have to pronounce it, so do you.
I'll just say the Maher. And I took unto me faithful witnesses to record Uriah the priest and Zechariah the son of Jeberechiah. And I went unto the prophetess, and she conceived and bare a son. Then said the Lord to me, call his name Maher-shalal-Hashbaz. For before the child shall have known knowledge to cry, my father and my mother, the riches of Damascus and the spoil of Samaria shall be taken away before the king of Assyria. The Lord spake also unto me again, saying, forasmuch as this people refuse the waters of Shiloh that go softly, and rejoice in Rezin and Remaliah son, now therefore behold, the Lord bringeth up upon the waters of the river strong and many, even the king of Assyria, in all his glory, and he shall come up over all his channels and go over all his banks. You say to verse 10?
Yep.
And he shall pass through Judah, he shall overflow and go over, and he shall reach even to the neck, and the stretching out of those wings shall fill the breadth of thy land, O Emmanuel. Associate yourselves, O ye people, and ye shall be broken in pieces, and give ear all ye of far countries. Gird yourselves, and ye shall be broken in pieces. Gird yourselves, and ye shall be broken in pieces. Take counsel together, and it shall become to naught. Speak the word, and it shall not stand, for God is with us.
Okay. So first, Isaiah is asked to write all these things on a tablet of stone. What's significant about that? Huh? What did you say? Oh, I thought you were laughing at my spelling or something. I was like, what? You started laughing. I was like, did I write it wrong? I just assume I made a mistake, all right? It's happened before. When? Moses. Okay. Comes from God. Anyone else think of anything? So oftentimes, where did they write most of the time? Scrolls, right? They'd roll it up, scroll. Tablets, whenever you wrote something on stone, it was so that it can be displayed. And it wouldn't be a little tablet. They would take a huge piece of stone, right? And they would put it up, prop it up, and they would write on it. And it was permanent. Couldn't be changed, couldn't be altered, couldn't be. God saying, write it in stone, right? This will be done. Now, the difference between Isaiah 7 and Isaiah 8, Isaiah 7 is trust me and I will destroy Assyria. Isaiah 8 is Isaiah's going, the people didn't trust you. And God's saying, because they rejected the calm waters, and water, by the way, in Scripture often is a symbol of what? Cleansing, salvation, right? Purification. God saved them. They didn't have to do anything. He literally told them, they're going to come. They're not going to touch you. It's going to be okay. Have faith. Have trust. He didn't ask them to fight. There was no fighting. He didn't ask them to pick up arms. He didn't ask them to destroy them. They're not going to have to defeat Assyria. And ultimately, they're not going to have to fight Assyria. We'll get there when we get to Kings later. They rejected the calm water, so what is God sending? He's going to strong the mighty, or the strong waters, and you're going to have to learn the hard way. I'm still going to defeat Assyria, but you're also going to now suffer when you wouldn't have had to suffer before. Okay? And this is the sign to Isaiah, by the way. This isn't spoken to the people. So Isaiah is obviously going through some turmoil himself. Right? Now, Isaiah was promised back in Isaiah chapter 6, what was his ministry going to be like? When he said, here I am, send me, and God says, okay, are you ready for this? What did he tell him was going to happen? You're going to speak. They're not going to listen. You're going to plead. They're going to reject you, and ultimately it's going to take your life. Isaiah spoke. They're not listening. Now, 10 years later, why is Isaiah needing the sign? Why is this not being spoken to Ahaz and the people? Why is this given to Isaiah? And ultimately, we're going to see here in a little bit, his disciples. Was Isaiah not a man as well? You think Isaiah feared, hey, God's promise was conditional based on our faith and our trust. Is Judah as a whole has not done what? Has not had faith and trust. Where does that now leave us because of the lack of our faith? That's what we're talking about, okay? Assyria is still going to come, right? It will be swept on into Judah. Now they're going to have to suffer. Now watch this. This is cool. It says, it will overflow and pass on, reaching even to the neck, and its outspread wings will fill the breadth of your land, O Emmanuel. This is an interesting little... What was the sign they would be saved? So this is the sign of salvation, which once again, Emmanuel means what? God with us. What are the people going to cry when Assyria comes and sweeps through their villages and cities? What does it say they say? Oh, and it's in the land, now it's called the land of who? The land of Emmanuel. There is I believe some messianic foreshadowing that when the Emmanuel comes to save, that Emmanuel will also go through his own suffering and persecution, right? And then ultimately look at verse 10, or look at verse 9, it says, be broken. And that you peoples is you nations, so we're speaking of Assyria now, 9 and 10. Be broken, you peoples, and be shattered, give ear, all you far countries, strap on your armor and be shattered, strap on your armor and be shattered. Take counsel together, but it will come to nothing. Speak a word, but it will not stand, for God is with us. For what we're going to see, God made a promise to save. The promise was based upon their faith and trust. They lacked faith and trust, but God still made a promise. And what is he going to do? And because God's name is stamped behind the promise, Judah is going to be saved based upon God's promise and his character. This is exactly the conversation that happens back in Exodus 33 and 34. Now, Moses is trying to work it out in his own head, but God, if you abandon us, what will the nations think? Because you made a promise that you would go with us. Okay, I'll send you an angel. An angel will go before you. And Moses goes, if you don't go, there's no point in us going to the promised land, because the promised land without God is nothing. And so Judah's going to be saved based upon the Emmanuel, the God with us. Okay? And so in spite of Ahab's lack of faith, God's going to show Ahaz at the end of it, when they get through this, God saves them because God makes a promise, ultimately. And Isaiah and his disciples are being reminded of this. Watch this. Look at verse 11. For the Lord spoke thus to me with his strong hand upon me and warned me not to walk in the way of his people. So verse 11, we're speaking to Isaiah. Why would God have to put his strong hand on Isaiah to warn him? Okay, there could be a comforting thing. Could be an urging, a pleading. Maybe Isaiah is kind of going, right? I mean, are there other prophets of the Lord going around at this time? We're going to see them later. And what are they saying? Peace, peace. What are they claiming? Everything's good. Right? We are God's people. The temple still stands, right? There's going to be all these false prophets who are out there speaking. I don't think any man of God is beyond being tempted to give in to the pressures of what everybody else is doing. And Isaiah is probably the odd man out for these last 10 years. Don't worry, it's not going to happen. Don't worry, it's not going to happen. And the other prophets, actually, at this time, they're not saying peace, peace now. They're going to say that later with Babylon. Right now, they're saying, let's go to Egypt. Let's go to Egypt. Let's go to these other gods. Okay? Because in the midst of this, if you're reading Kings, Ahaz was a god, or Ahaz was a king, who still worshiped the high places, who worshiped the other gods and idols. And these other prophets are encouraging them to, hey, why don't we seek another sign? Why don't we seek other help outside of the God of Israel? And so, verse 11, the Lord spoke thus to me with a strong hand upon me, warned me not to walk in the way of his people. The only reason why God would warn Isaiah not to do something, is if there's a small temptation, however small, for Isaiah to give in. Now, ultimately, Isaiah's got to be strong, as we're going to see, for his own disciples. So look at verse 12. Do not call conspiracy all that this people calls conspiracy. Do not fear what they feared, nor be in dread. But the Lord of hosts, him you shall honor as holy. Let him be your fear. Let him be your dread. Right? Who are you going to fear more? Are you going to fear Assyria? Or are you going to fear God? That's ultimately what he's asking. Are you going to fear Assyria? Or are you going to fear God? Who should put more fear in you? God should. Now, putting your fear in God, what is the end result of that? Salvation. Fearing Assyria ends in destruction. Ends in you giving up, becoming slaves, servants, right? Maybe going and trying to purchase Egypt's help, which they do dumbly many years later. Doesn't work out for them. Watch this. And he will become a sanctuary and a stone of offense, a rock of stumbling to both the house of Israel, and a trap and a snare to the inhabitants of Jerusalem. So God can either be a sanctuary or the stone of offense. Choose you this day who you will serve. Because for Israel and Judah, the way they're going and who they're fearing and what the actions they're doing, God, it's going to be a snare and a trap. There is an illusion. There is an illusion that Judah has bought into, that there's another solution to get out of this besides God and God alone. And God says, that's the trap. The trap is to think there's another way out besides the one that I've told you. Right? There's another solution besides the one that I've offered. There isn't. Okay? So, ultimately, here's what he's going to say. He says, and many shall stumble on it. They shall fall and be broken. They shall be snared and taken it. So verse 16, bind up the testimony, seal the teaching among my disciples. There are still people who have not done what? Who have not walked the way of Judah and Israel. There are still faithful people, right, who are following Isaiah. Verse 17, I will wait for the Lord, who is hiding his face from the house of Jacob, and I will hope in him. Behold, I and the children whom the Lord has given me are signs and portents in Israel from the Lord of hosts, who dwells on Mount Zion. Isaiah saying, I'm going to be a beacon. I'm going to be a beacon of hope. I'm going to be a beacon of light for my disciples and also for Israel. Now, a good example does two things, doesn't it? A good example allows others to follow. But what does it also do to those who decide to reject and not follow? What does a good example do? It both condemns, because it can be done. Right? There are so many people, when they come up with excuses, it can't be done. Well, this person did it. right? I cannot trust during, you don't understand, there was this going on in my life. Well, we've got example after example after example of people who went through exactly what you went through, and they stood firm. Was it hard? Yeah, Isaiah is having to be reminded and warned, don't go the way of them. Be an example of hope. Because here, I know I've got a few minutes left, here is what people do who don't have hope. The rest of the chapter, this is what people who have no hope, this is how they live their life. Verse 19, and when they say to you, inquire of the mediums and necromancers who chirp and mutter. What do people who have no hope do? They will go anywhere, won't they? They will seek answers anywhere. I mean, why are mediums and those types of people even big still in today's world, right? Which is funny because so many people like reject religion outright, but they'll go talk to a medium who's telling them their grandma, right, is telling them that, right? It's like when you have no hope and when you don't have anywhere else to turn, you're going to turn somewhere. And a lot of times, our wisdom points us to places that are just whack and crazy. But I'm just going to put it plainly. Okay? It says, should not a people inquire of their God? Like if you're going to ask, and I've already given you a sign, if you're going to ask me. I've already been asking, ask me a sign. I'm telling you to test me. I will prove myself to you. They won't do it. Should they inquire of the dead on behalf of the living? To the teaching and to the testimony, if they will not speak according to this word, it is because they have no dawn. What does it mean when they have no dawn? There's nothing to look forward to. There's not another day. They're stuck. They're at the end. There's no light. We would call it, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. That's what we'd say. They have no hope. They will pass through the land, greatly distressed and hungry, and when they are hungry, they will be enraged and will speak contemptuously, that's the best I got, guys, against their king and their God and turn their faces upward. He's saying they're going to go into exile. They're going through the land. They're going to be hungry. They will look to the earth, but behold, distress and darkness, the gloom of anguish, and they will be thrust into thick darkness. Now, this is going to begin a theme in Isaiah of light and darkness. What do people love? They love darkness. They do. I mean, we don't like to think of that, but when you look at the reality of the world, people love darkness. Some people love evil. They love their sin. Now, some people are deceived to the point where they don't even think it's darkness. They think they're living the light life, right? But these people know what they're doing. They're walking in darkness. They have no hope. There's nothing for them. They're going into exile. But chapter 9 is that the end of the story with God? God's grace and mercy will even bring those out who reject and purposely walk in the darkness. What will he do? He will still go. He'll walk into the darkness. He will show them the light and give them an opportunity to do what? Come back. Now, on a small scale, that's going to be coming back from exile. Chapter 9 is actually going to point us to a greater concept of Emmanuel, which Isaiah is going to pick up later, the suffering servant who will come and pay the sins on our behalf and also rescue us from out of our own personal, unrighteous darkness. All right, thank you. I wanted to get the first 7 verses of chapter 9, but we'll hit that next week.